So hello everybody, in this tutorial we'll talk about creating vegetation and getting it in Unreal Engine. So for this tutorial we're going to use Quixel Bridge. We're going to download one of these atlases. So we need to find atlases, and I'm going to use a fern. So in this example, but you can use any of these, like grass, different herbs. I'm just going to use, let's say, this one. So we just need to download it. We don't need displacement. So we need these accept displacement. I'm going to download it. And then we're going to use Maya. Yeah. So as we download this, I'm going to use shift right click and make a plane. Right now my grid is set to, right click on grid option here, is set to 200 and 100 grid lines. So I get each meter, so I get 1 meter here, and then this is 10 centimeters. I'm just going to scale this up using R. Remove these subdivisions. I don't need any subdivisions. I'm just going to actually pull back my scale to 1, and then just increase the width here. Let's just say 50 and 50. That's going to be 50 centimeters. Maybe it's too much. No, it's okay. So right click, go to files. It's going to open a new window, and we need to just get the albedo and the opacity. Yeah, so we'll need just the albedo and opacity in Maya just as a guide. So we're going to create a texture and we're going to put it on this plane. This plane already has the default UV, so it's fine. We don't need to UV anything. So shift right click, just right click, yeah, just right click without shift, assign new material, and I'm going to use a surface Maya. I'm going to use a Lambert. So this Lambert 2, I'm going to call it Fern Matte Material. And we need to plug in something in the color and something in the transparency, okay? So I need a file, and I need to locate where this is. So I just copy this path, Control C, go here, Control V, and albedo, open. And if we click on this button here, we're going to show the textures. Now we need the transparency as well. So again, click on the checker, and then the file, and then folder and opacity. We need to get the opacity. Yeah, don't use the translucency, use the opacity, and open. And now we have them here. Okay. So now we can actually start cutting these. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start cutting these using the multi-cut tool. So with Quixel Bridge, we're pretty much done. We're not going to use it in this tutorial. Just keep this folder open because we'll need to import these in Unreal. Yeah. So with this plane selected, I use the multi-cut, shift right click, and I'm going to try to cut this tightly. Okay, tight. Not too many. And then right click. Also, I'm just going to remove the excess here. Right click. So select the face. sorry, Q, press Q, select the face, delete. Now just fixing the problem with having n-gons. So shift right click multi-cut. I was in object mode, yeah. Shift right click multi-cut, and we need to cut this. So we're gonna have some geometry in there just to twist it or bend it or something like that. And then perhaps one on the middle. I mean, don't go too crazy with this, because we want to have this low poly, yeah. I might have just one or two lines too much. Okay, so now I can select these faces. I'm gonna deselect this one. So, and then shift right click and extract faces. And now this is a different kind of icon. I can move my pivot point, D and V. I can move my pivot point here, rotate it up. Then we're going to use some modifiers, but not now. Let's just finish with the other ones. And the same thing goes for this one. I'm going to have only maybe a small one, a dried one, and one or two of these. I mean, you can use all of them. So let's just use multi-cut again. Now fixing this geometry. And then adding one on the middle. And then I like to remove everything, all this excess that I have in the. Okay. Extract these faces. Moving the pivot point D and V, hold, and then select it from this middle point. Rotate with pressing J. That's gonna snap to 15 degrees, I think. And then holding X is gonna snap it to the grid here. The same with this one. Holding X, snapping to the grid. So I got two. I'm gonna use the dry one. Shift right click, multi-cut. Escape. I don't like how I started. If you want to go back, if you think you made a mistake, go press backspace. Or if you want to go all the way back, just press escape. As that's gonna reset the multi-cut selection. Yeah. Right click is going well. Actually, I forgot I need to do this first. So click and drag, right click and drag, then right click to complete. Right click, selecting these faces, deselect the big one, extract the faces, do the same thing, D and V, snap it here, snap it to the grid, pressing X, rotate E, and then holding J. Okay, that's nice. But for this tutorial, to keep it short, which I'm just gonna have one more. I'm not gonna have all of these things. Maybe a dry one, a really dried one. Yeah, I'm gonna use this one. And it doesn't let me go here, so I'm just gonna go here first, right click and right click. Let's just solve the problems here with the n-gons. Select everything, deselect this and this. Extract faces. DNV X E and then holding J. Okay. So I'm gonna delete these ones. I mean, you don't have to, but and now I can duplicate this one, Control D. Gonna have 2 of these each, and maybe 2 of these as well. And now we're just gonna use some deformers, and we're gonna use the nonlinear deformers. So we're going to use twist. The twisting is not right. We need to rotate this twisting like that. So it need to be at the top and bottom side. And then we can just use the start angle to twist it a little bit, like so. Okay, select this geometry again, and now we're going to use another deformer, and that's going to be a bend deformer. Nonlinear bend. I can actually use Control Shift and add them to my poly modeling shelf here, or your custom shelf. So we can just create a new shelf, my shelf. If I can spell that would be nice. Oh, I already have one. Yeah, I already have one. Let's just go to that one. And oh, look at that. And then deform. Use Control Shift, hold Control Shift, and click on bend and twist. So now I have them here. Now I already have twist. I'm going to use bend. This one is not right as well. I think it needs to be like this, and then the curvature, and then bend it a little bit. We can remove the the high bound if we want to. And once we're done, we can use Alt Shift D, and that's going to delete the history. It's going to remove all the funky stuff that was happening to create the bends. The same way with this one. Curvature, and you can rotate actually this curvature like so. I think we can also scale, so you can do a lot of stuff to this. Then Alt Shift D. This one we can scale it down. We can duplicate this one again. I think I pressed H by mistake, so it was hiding it. Just press H again. Alt Shift D. And I think I'm in object mode, so if just delete the history, freeze the transformations, that's just gonna reset that pivot. Alt Shift D. I'm just gonna try to give it a look. Also the pivot point is important. Just move it in the right position. And I think they can intersect a little bit, that's fine. Again, freeze the transformations. And we can also manually move these vertices, so we can just, but it's stretching, so I think if we rotate something, you can see there's stretching happening. It's because we're deforming the UVs, we're changing the UVs, so just Control Shift right click and then preserve UVs, and that's gonna try to keep those UVs in the right position. Just be careful not to go outside or inside too much. And I think I should have done that as well here. So again, Control Shift, be sure that Preserve UVs is on. Control Shift right click. Because that's the reason I added the middle ones in the first place, the middle line. There's a bit of stretching here in the bottom, but we can just select these vertices and bring them back like that. But that's going to give it a bit more of 3D. Maybe without the bottom one. I'm trying to have a variation of some smaller, some bigger. It's good to have some reference. I don't, but I think it's the best thing to have when you're making plans. Just try and use reference. Don't reinvent the creation. Anyway, I'm not going to go too deep in this. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to use these two because you can play with these all day long. And actually we can have a variation of these. We can have 2 or 3 different layouts. So that should be one, and then you can duplicate this one a little bit. So I duplicated these. Did I? I'm gonna Control G to group them. Then they're all in here. I'm just gonna middle mouse click and drag the group outside. I'm gonna delete this one. So these we can Control D to duplicate them, Control G to make a new group, and middle mouse click and drag the group outside. So now we have 2 different groups, and I have the group selected. Yeah, I don't have the individual. I have the group from here, from the outliner. So that's group 2, and group 2 is gonna be different. It's gonna have some bigger, some smaller, and you can lay out or even tweak the geometry if you want to. Add more dry ones, Control D. And so on, yeah. Once you're done, let's say we're done with these, I can actually shift right click, select all of them, shift right click, combine, Alt Shift D to delete history. So that's going to be Fern 1. Select all of them, shift right click, combine, Alt Shift D, delete history, and call this Fern 2. When we are going to import them to, it's really important to move the pivot point to the X, Y, and Z 0. So that's here, yeah, the origin. So File, Export, Selection. Static mesh. Fern 1, just Fern 1, leave it like Fern 1. Okay, that's one. I think I named them. So the pivot point is here in Maya, but Unreal uses this origin point. So even if your pivot point is there, it matters where the 0, 0 XYZ coordinate is in relation to your object. So if my object is going to be here, then my object is going to have the pivot point here, not here, yeah? In Unreal, I mean. So let's just export this one as well. Export selection. It's going to be corn fern 2. And then we just need Unreal. So just open a new blank. I already have this one here. Can disable this landscape. So just make a new landscape. Create. Sculpt it using the sculpt tool from here and do whatever you want. And you know, add the textures. We've gone through that. We've made already a tutorial adding texture to the landscape. And then we go to foliage. Yeah. So let's just go to this tutorial, make a new folder and call this Vegetation. And then we need to go and drag and drop our ferns from wherever you export them to here. And this one already has auto-generate collision. We don't want collision. It says it's going to generate light map UVs. We'll talk about these things in a later tutorial. But have that checked on. It's already on, so import all. So I see it already made this material, fern material. So if I just drag and drop this one here, select, press F to frame this. It's okay, but the problem is that it's not the material is not made for vegetation. So I'm going to delete this one from here. Delete. And we're going to use the material which was created actually for us, and is going to be actually created later from Bridge. And I only need to do is to change this to because I don't have the Quixel Bridge plugin in here, and I need to get that on. So I need to get again to where I installed it. F programs V4.24, select folder, and it's going to install. It says it's installed successfully. But now the thing that I need to do, I need to restart my project. So I'm going to save all, close, and just open Unreal again. That's weird, it doesn't show up here. Let me just try and export something to just export one of these already made ferns. Just download this one. I'm gonna check where this showing Explorer. So this is where it is without content. So this is the location. Control C. And I'm gonna Control V here. That's my project location. And let's just try and export. Let's see what it says here. Says cannot send data over port because for some reason the plugin is disabled. I'm gonna pause it for a second, see what's wrong with my setup here. Then I'm gonna come back as soon as I fix it. I'm gonna let you know. So I discovered here it was built in. It says it's built in, and it was disabled. Now I enabled it from here. Just typed in plugin, so you can find in settings plugins, and I just Quixel, type in here, Megascans. Yeah, Megascans. So enable it and then restart, and it should work. Let's just have a look. So as you can see, now we get this link here. Let's switch it on. Actually, I don't think we need that to switch on. So the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna export a default one of these herbs, and we're gonna use the shader. We can use fern or any other thing, grass. Let's just use the grass one. And we're going to export it, and we're going to use the shader setup which they made for vegetation, because that's, you know, instead of making our own. And be sure you have the project location set up here properly, then export. Then in here you'll see something is happening, and it's importing and creating the shader for us, and we're going to use the shader to put our own textures in there. So now we're going to use these maps here, Control C, or actually we're just going to drag and drop them. In vegetation, we're just gonna drag and drop them in here. So this is everything we used. I mean, we're gonna use, and then we go to Megascans, foliage. We just need this grass, and this is a material instance. We don't need the instance, we need the parent. So just right click and find parent, and this is the foliage material. Yeah, it's in MS presets foliage material. Double click on this one. Okay, so this is the build setup, and we just need two. We can do two things. We can just copy all this stuff, Control C, and make our own material, yeah, or we can just create a material instance and call this, I'll just leave it like that, and just drag and drop it in here, move, okay, and then double click, and now there's nothing here, I mean, and we need to just enable these normal, opacity, roughness, and albedo, yeah. So that is a material instance. We created a material instance, and then we just need to drag and drop our albedo, AO. We don't have AO right now set up here, just normal, opacity, roughness, and translucency, and then save. So now we get Fern 1, double click on Fern 1, and we can use this new foliage material instance and drag and drop it in here. Okay. And save it. The same with the second one, double click, Fern 2, select it, and you can use this arrow here That's going to replace it. Save. So after we save these two, we can go to foliage, and it already imported some stuff here. When we imported, just added them. Just control click, select them two, and drag and drop them in here. Now these two are enabled. You can see them. They are enabled. Yeah, we're in foliage. We need check. Let's just check. Let's see how it goes, like that. I think it should compile. Yeah. So that is compiled. We can change these settings here for each individual one. You can change the density and reduce it. Let's say we want less, let's say 50. If we press shift now, we can delete that. And if we want to have them bigger, we can increase this maximum. So I have them both selected. We can make it twice as big. Yeah, so we get, again, shift. So some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger. And now the real benefit that comes from this shader is that if we double click, we can enable this grass wind. Now, my computer is very slow. So enable this grass wind here. And you can play with these values. This wind setup is just like, this doesn't want to work. Well, when you're making tutorials, stuff this side. Now, for example, these trees, they were just fine. It has the same exact setup. But for some reason, these ones don't want to work. All right, I'm just going to have a short look at this and come back with the solution. Okay, so I solved the problem. I mean, I realized what was the problem. So I looked into the material, and in the material, I saw that it was this vertex color, and it used the green channel as an alpha. So this is a way so you can paint on the mesh with wind, basically, or delete wind from some parts of the mesh. If you don't want this, you just select this and plug this directly from here without having the vertex color node in here in the alpha. So if we just get a fern in here, and this fern, I'm just going to remove the instances. Okay, Okay, so that's what that was. I think this was our default material, foliage material instance. I made another one here. It just copied this. Actually, I'm going to make it one more time so you guys can follow. So we're just going to make a new material. And double click. We need to change this from defaultly to two-sided foliage. Enable two-sided. And this one from opaque to masked. Okay, so that's what we changed. Let's see if we can get here use with okay, I'll just leave it like that. So what we said that we'll go to these presets, and that was the foliage material created for us. Yes, and we can copy this wind. So if you want to use this as it is, don't do what I do, just create a material instance and then enable these values and then drag and drop the textures from the vegetation that we have here. Yeah, so this one, normal, opacity, roughness, and translucency. Yeah. And then enable the wind. Save it. And then get this in the vegetation. Move it here. It says that's already one there. Just give it a new name. So this is the one that we just made. And then we need to select the parent, the static mesh for the ferns. This one. And selecting this material instance, we have it selected, it's orange here. Then we go to the fern and use this arrow. And that's going to replace the texture, yeah? The same with the number 2. Replace. We use this one. Okay, and then we save it. After that, let's save this one as well. It has an asterisk here. It had an asterisk. So after that, we can, so selecting the geometry, we can go into paint mode, weights, and then if we press shift, I think if we just, actually not shift, we just paint like that. You can see my settings here. And if you want to remove something, you can use shift and remove with this. So it's either you paint and then use shift to remove, or you remove it from here. So that is one way of doing it. The other one would be just to remove that, because if we're going to use it on these ones, these will be painted on the terrain, and that's going to be foliage, and the foliage is different from the static meshes here. So we're not going to be able to paint each individual foliage, and that's how we can adjust this material. So if you just go to foliage material instance, right click, find the parent, that's our parent, and then we're going to remove the vertex color, or we can just put the default value here instead of 0, and I think this should work by default, so we don't have to just reroute the whole nodes here. Vegetation. And now it's working. Okay, yeah, so this was for this tutorial. If you have any problems with this, just let me know on the Discord channel. I'm sure we'll be able to solve it, really quickly. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you next time.